My name is Earl Willis Jr. Today is June the 1st, 2017. I work for the Warren County Public Library. We're in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and today I'm speaking to Mr. Williford. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Williford, where and when were you born?
I was born on Monday, November 25th, 1985 at Audubon Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay, in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I'm an only child.
Only child, okay. Did any of your family, like your mother, your father, your aunts, uncles, or cousins, were they in the military?
Yes, not going back too far, my great-grandfather on my grandmother's side served with the 12th Engineers in World War I. My grandfather on my mother's side was an infantryman with the 2nd Infantry Division, 38th Infantry Regiment during the Korean War. He was a decorated soldier who received 3 Purple Hearts while in Korea. And I have 3 uncles, my mom's brothers. 2 served in the Air Force and 1 served in the Army.
Okay. Do you feel as though that influenced you any?
You know, it did, yes. Growing up around them, no one talked about it very much. I mean, I knew that they all served, but no one really talked about it that much. But when I made the decision to go into the service, I realized then how much influence it did have on me growing up around them.
Okay.
But honestly, I didn't know till I was going in how much it had impacted me.
Okay. So like when you were in high school or even like when you were 8 or 9 years old, did you ever think about being in the military? That it crossed your mind?
The thought never crossed my mind. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I was going to ever serve in the uniformed services, I would have laughed. I never thought that I would have done it.
Okay.
The thought never crossed my mind.
Yeah, and a lot of the people I've interviewed, their family has a big influence on them being in the military.
Sure.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a law clerk at a local law firm here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Just doing general clerical duties. I worked that job for 4 years, from the time I was 18 to the time that I entered the service. I left that job to go into the Army while I was working on my undergraduate degree. I was working on a bachelor's degree.
Okay, so were you attending Western?
I was attending Western, yes.
Okay. And what branch did you serve?
I served in the United States Army.
Okay. Was there a reason why you chose the Army over the other branches?
There was, and this is kind of funny. I never considered joining the military, as we discussed. And I woke up one morning, it was a Thursday, around 3 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep in my bed. I just woke up, stood up in my bed, so to speak, and said, I'm going to join the military today. It hit me in the middle of the night that I wanted to do that. And I went and saw the recruiter immediately. I guess it was sort of a rash decision, but I decided that I wanted to do it. And once my mind was set, it was set. I went into the recruiting station here in Bowling Green, and they had all the branches there. I initially went to the Air Force recruiter because I had 2 uncles that I knew served in the Air Force, and that made the most sense to me. After talking to them, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to choose my job with the Air Force.
Okay.
They would place me in a job. And so they said, and I said, well, I'm not willing to do that because with my luck, I figured I'd end up in some job that wasn't fulfilling to me. I'd, be a sewage pipe fitter or something like that. So I wasn't happy with that. And so they recommended that I go talk to the Army recruiter. I went to the Army recruiter, and they, in fact, allowed me to select a job that I wanted. And so that's why I chose the Army, and I'm glad that I did.
Okay.
Actually, they had a better benefits package at the time than the other branches did too. So it was a wise decision on my part.
What year was this?
This was I enlisted 16 September 2008.
2008.
2008, yes.
Okay. Did anyone go with you, or did you go by yourself?
I went solo. I went by myself, unbeknownst to my friends, family, co-workers. I went. That was all that was done pretty much in secret. Going to the recruiter station and talking to them. I was talking to recruiters all this time, and I didn't inform anybody about it until days before I signed the paperwork.
Okay. What was your family's reaction?
I had mixed reaction from my family. my grandfather, who was like a father figure to me, like I said, he was in Korea and he was a soldier in the army. He was initially was opposed to it, as was most everyone that I told about it, because they were particularly upset because I enlisted. I had the college to go in as an officer.
Okay.
But I chose to enlist versus going the officer route because, again, if you become an officer, you're placed in a branch as an officer. You don't get to select. You don't get to choose whether you want to be an officer, or an infantry officer, or a signal officer, or a med corps officer. They place you. So again, I was adamant about entering the JAG Corps, and so I chose to go the enlisted route. So my family was very upset, and my coworkers and bosses and things, not upset, but troubled and worried that I enlisted versus going officer.
Okay, so they wanted you to be like a commission, like start off like maybe first lieutenant or second lieutenant.
That was their plan. They thought, well, Will, if you're going to do this, why are you enlisting? Why aren't you going the officer branch? In their eyes, they thought it was a safer route for me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a bit prestigious, maybe a bit more beneficial to my future. It was. Everyone had my best interest in mind.
Okay.
But I was determined. I wanted to be enlisted. I wanted to be in the JAG Corps, and so that's what I did. I had some family cousins who didn't understand the military. I don't think very much. I didn't really understand much either in the beginning. That almost ridiculed me and laughed at me about it because they didn't think, oh well, it was so crazy that I would consider joining the military that they thought, oh my goodness, that's not the Will that we know that would join the military. So they didn't think I would be successful in it. And a couple of them laughed at me and stuff, but it was in jest, nothing personal. Okay. But I remember it to this day. I remember it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it later. But you were an officer, but you were a non-commissioned officer.
I was a non-commissioned officer. Yes. Okay. I worked my way up the ranks.
Okay.
So.
Do you remember being sworn in? Where were you sworn in?
Yes, sir, I do. I remember being sworn in. Like I said, I entered here. I was recruited out of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I went through the MEPS in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was sworn in Nashville, Tennessee, at the MEPS station down there on the day that I left, which would have been 15 September 2008. I was sworn in. And it may have been the 16th, but I believe I was sworn in the day before I was officially in the military, from what I recall. Okay. And I remember it well.
Is it December? You said December?
September.
September. Okay.
September, yes, September. Okay. And I remember it well. I remember standing up there, and it was almost surreal what was happening. I remember raising my hand, and I was surrounded by other men and women that were enlisting in other branches. And at the time, it was surreal because I knew at that moment there was no turning back. It was like, okay, this is it. This is really happening now. Yeah. It's not just a thought in my mind. It's really happening. But I also, looking back now, realize that I didn't understand what a big deal it was. I've learned to appreciate that day a lot more now than I did at the time. I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't know it was as a big a deal as it was.
Yeah, because I've talked to guys and they're like 70 years old, and they remember the day that they took the oath.
I do, and I've taken the oath on 2 separate occasions because I have a re-enlistment under my belt as well. Okay. So when you take the oath again, you're sworn in again. Okay. So I've taken the oath twice.
Do you remember? Where did you go for your basic training?
I left out of Nashville, Tennessee. And this is funny to me. I had basic training and advanced individual training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We left in what I remember to be like a 12-passenger van, but there was like 14 of us crammed in there. So if it was a 16-passenger van, there was 18 of us in there. Okay. There was more people in the van than should have been. Okay. And we were crammed in there like sardines for the entire trip from Nashville to, I believe it's Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson. I had my bag on my lap the entire time. And it was just the most uncomfortable situation to the first day in this Army.
What was your nerves?
I was sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to expect. I was surrounded by men and women that I didn't know. I was apprehensive, nervous. There was no pride at that point. It was just I was scared. I was scared.
Yeah.
I was scared.
Was it? Did you? Were they female like anxious, excited, nervous?
All the above.
All of it. All of it.
It was a mixture of all of it. Yes,
Yeah.
every bit of it. Every bit of it.
It was probably,
the unknown is scary.
the people were people talking, or were they quiet? Pretty quiet.
It was quiet. It was a somber moment for everybody driving down there.
Yeah. So, do you remember? A lot of times I talk to people and they say they get there like real early morning or late at night.
It was super early in the morning. I mean, I'm guessing here. I would say we arrived at, oh my goodness, 2 or 3 in the morning, and we arrived to drill sergeants screaming and yelling at us. I mean, the exact second before we even exited the vehicle, they were at the window screaming at us and yelling at us to move our behinds. I mean, that was my welcome to the Army, was being, and I'd never experienced anything like that. I had never been talked to like that. I didn't know people talk to other people like that until that day. And I mean, that was an eye-opener for me. I was like, at that moment, I thought, what have I got myself into? The exact moment we pulled in, we were welcomed by drill sergeants wearing brown rounds.
Okay. I've talked to other guys about this, and people talk about that they think that when people like they're in your face and they're hollering at you and stuff, that they're trying to be mean and disrespectful. But can you explain what they're doing?
Absolutely. That is not the case at all. When they're in your face yelling and screaming and carrying on, they have your best interest in mind while they're doing that. And the way it was explained to me, and maybe it's been explained to others differently, but it was explained to me that the reason that they're in your face, hooting, hollering, yelling, carrying on, acting crazy, is because that's the way it is in a war zone. If you're in a firefight and if you're in combat, it's not calm, and people aren't just whispering to you. People are yelling and screaming at each other, and go here, do this, do that, enemy contact left, right, etc., etc. And it's a chaotic moment. Being in combat is chaos, and the drill sergeants are preparing you for that. And so I was in basic. Now, from what I understand, every cycle of basic training nowadays, it could be 14 weeks, it could be 10 weeks, it could be this, it could be that. Mine was 14 weeks long.
Okay.
So for 14 weeks, it was chaos. Organized chaos.
Okay.
But it was constant yelling, screaming, waking you up in the middle of the night. No one ever placed a hand on me. A drill sergeant never once laid a hand on me, not once. Not me. But they do that because they care and they're training you for how combat really is.
Okay, and are they trying to, I've heard maybe told that they're trying to get you out of the individual frame of mind and it's a team.
That's also very true. They treat everybody the same. I never once saw anyone from any background, race, creed, color, religion, anything treated any differently while I was in the service, and basic training as well, since we're on basic training. Everyone was treated the same, and I remember writing a letter home. I wrote letters regularly from basic training to friends, colleagues, family. I love to write, and I wrote letters home a lot. And I remember one day, midway, halfway, 3/4 of the way through basic training, looking at myself in the mirror, and looking at myself and seeing a soldier for the first time. Before that, I wrote home to my grandfather and friends and family saying, I don't feel like a soldier. I don't feel like a soldier. I don't feel like a soldier. But then one day I looked at myself in the mirror. After so much training, I thought to myself, I am an American soldier now. Like I have, it was like a rite of passage for me.
Okay.
I've crossed over now. And I wrote home about it. And I said, hey, now I'm a soldier. I've changed. I'm not the same man that I was when I left. I have changed. And all that was about being a team, working as a team.
Yeah.
It was very much a team effort. A lot of the obstacles and training that we did couldn't be completed if you didn't work as a team. An individual couldn't do it.
Okay. How did you adapt to the physical training?
I adapted well.
Pretty good?
Pretty good, yes, sir. By the time I left there, I was in the best shape of my life, but I was also very active before I went in. Now, nothing could have prepared me for what basic training and advanced individual training had in store for me. I went in, felt like I was in great shape. I thought I would excel and be ahead of my peers entering. That was not the case at all. Okay. There were men and women in far better shape than I was, but I was still in pretty good shape. And there were people less fit than me as well. But nothing can prepare you for that. I remember before I went in, the recruiter we had to take a physical training test to assess where we were physically before you go into the service. And I remember the recruiter timing me with a stopwatch for a 2-mile run. I never run 2 miles in my whole life, ever, never. And I thought, well, that 2 miles isn't very far.
It's a long way.
It's a long way. I remember taking off like a daggone jackrabbit, running as fast, sprinting, thinking I would just sprint the whole thing.
You burn out.
I burned out before the first mile. I ended up walking the rest of the way back. It was a humbling experience for me. I still met the time requirement, but I knew at that moment, okay, I'm in for something here because I thought, well, I'll just sprint this whole thing. No big deal. Oh, I was humbled that day. I never run 2 miles. I never ran 2 miles in a row before.
Were you in your your tennis shoes?
I was in tennis shoes and basketball shorts at the time. I wasn't even dressed properly, I don't think. I probably had 2 shirts on and a pair of heavy basketball shorts. Probably had on basketball shoes too. Looking back now, I was totally unprepared for it.
Okay.
I think most are.
So, do any of your instructors stand out the most, or remember the most, or?
Yes, there's 2 drill sergeants. I think each company has 3 drill sergeants assigned to them in while you're basic training. Maybe 6, but I think 3. And there was a drill sergeant Galentine who was a male, and there was a drill sergeant. She was the head drill sergeant. A drill sergeant Ryan Russell, hyphenated, and she was a female. And I was scared to death of both of them. Petrified. No one had put the fear of God in me like those 2 did. But I also learned a lot from them. One was an infantryman, Drill Sergeant Galentine, and the senior Drill Sergeant Ryan Russell was I know now was a human resources. She did awards and things like that. But they were fantastic teachers, educators, exemplary soldiers. They excelled in their fields and their disciplines, and I learned a lot from both of them. Those 2 stand out most in my mind, and I think about them a lot today and wonder where they're at today.
Okay, so what most stand out in your mind? What were to intimidate you or make you, or what was it about them that got to you the most?
They were such professionals.
Professionals.
They were professionals. Their uniforms were always pressed. They were sharp. They were smart. They were dressed sharp. They were smart. They were refined in every way. Looking back now, every day to be a drill sergeant, every day you have to be at your best because you're setting the example and the standard for hundreds of soldiers at one time. And these 2, in my mind, were just that. Were every bit of that. And I'll tell you something. While you're going through this training process, this basic training process, you feel like the drill sergeants are machines, like they're not human, because they're just so by the book and this, and the way they speak to you and the way they handle themselves. But they're humans just like you and I. They have families at home. They have kids. Most of them have been in combat and have been through multiple deployments, even at the time. But they're humans just like us, and occasionally, and I got the experiences, occasionally you find yourself alone with a drill sergeant for whatever reason, whether you're on the firing range or whatever. It's just you and a drill sergeant one-on-one, and they speak to you like a caring educator would. It's like you and I are sitting here talking, having a conversation. There's no yelling, there's no excitement. It's just them talking to you mano a mano, and you realize then, well, maybe they really don't hate me. Yeah. Maybe they really do have my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
I had a lot of respect for the drill sergeants.
Okay.
A whole lot.
So when you left basic training, where did you go from there?
Well, from basic training, I left basic training to go to advanced individual training, which by coincidence was also at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So it was on the same post. But they made this big to-do about it, and it was very ceremonial going from, because we had a graduation for basic training, and then that day they loaded us up on buses and drove us. Probably, looking back now, probably wasn't 2 miles down the road to our next company. And arriving there at the next company was it was Alpha 369 was the training company that I was in for advanced individual training, and that's where I learned to be a JAG Corps soldier, to be a paralegal specialist. That's where I received my formal legal military training, I guess you could call it.
Okay.
Was a totally different experience because we arrived there to smiling faces, to soldiers that had a little bit of freedom. There were soldiers there to welcome us off the bus. Soldiers who were in training, not just the instructors. Other soldiers like us who were just a couple weeks further along in the process.
Okay.
And they had smiles on their faces. I hadn't seen a smile in a long time.
Okay.
So I knew then, I was like, okay, I moved beyond the first stepping stone, and things have gotten a little bit easier.
So once you make a basic training or boot camp, whatever you want to call it, it smooths out a little bit.
It does, yes. They give you, you've earned a little bit more freedom. You are now a soldier,
Okay.
and you know how to conduct yourself and how to handle yourself, and how to behave.
Okay.
You know how to behave. You've earned a little bit of respect. I mean, just a smidgen of respect.
Okay.
But you've earned a little bit of respect in the instructor's eyes.
Okay. And so how long did you stay there?
I believe that was, and you can correct my math on this, don't hold me. I believe that was 12, 16, that might have been 22 weeks. Here's how it breaks down. I entered the service on 16 September 2008. I reported, after all my training, I reported to Fort Bragg in March 2009. Okay, so from September 08 to March 09, I was in basic and AIT. So however long that was.
Okay.
So, I don't remember, like 6 months.
Okay.
It was around 6 months.
So that's when you learned how to be in the JAG?
That's how I learned to be a JAG soldier, yes.
Okay. And when you, did you leave the United States? Did you go overseas or anything?
Well, before we talk about that, I wanted to add that those 6 months that I was gone were the longest period of time I'd ever been away from home. It was the longest period of time I had ever been away from my family. And I had an opportunity at Christmas time. So I went in September of 08, and then Christmas of 08, they allowed us to go home because it was Christmas, to go see our family. I elected not to. I elected to stay there and not cut grass, but do menial labor tasks, and there was no training going on during that time. But I elected to stay there and not go home because I wanted to complete my training before I went home, if that makes sense. It was a personal thing. I just chose to. So I was gone for the 6 months, and then after my training was complete, then I went home to where my family was, which was in Clarkson, Kentucky, and visited them for the first time.
Okay.
After that, from Litchfield, I drove myself and all my possessions to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
And from Fort Bragg, I reported to the 82nd Airborne Division. So that's right, my story.
So when you from Fort Bragg, where did you go from there?
I was at Fort Bragg let me see here. I was at Fort Jackson from 16 September 08 to March 2009, and I was stationed at Fort Bragg from March 2009 to March 2012. So I was at Fort Bragg for about 3 years. There was a year deployment to Afghanistan during that time, and I visited several other Army posts while I was stationed at Fort Bragg for training. Like I had basic airborne training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I was a paratrooper while I was at Fort Bragg. Did a lot at Fort Bragg.
Can you tell us about being a paratrooper?
Sure, yeah. First off, Fort Bragg changed my life in every way. As far as I'm concerned, Fort Bragg is the center of the military universe. It's the most populous military installation in the world. It has more soldiers than any other place. Fort Hood is larger surface area wise, but Fort Bragg has more soldiers. Fort Bragg has the headquarters of the Reserve. Fort Bragg has the headquarters of Special Operations, and Fort Bragg has the 82nd Airborne Division, amongst other units, 18th Airborne Corps, headquarters for 18th Airborne Corps. It was an honor to serve at Fort Bragg. It changed my life. I'm thankful and appreciative that Fort Bragg was my first duty station because, again, as far as I'm concerned, Fort Bragg has the highest standards of any military installation I've ever been to. Highest standard for their soldiers as far as physical training goes, as far as conducting themselves, behavior. A lot of people don't make it at Fort Bragg because the standards are so high. Either you love Fort Bragg or you hate Fort Bragg. I loved it. It made me, it helped and influenced and shaped me into the man that I am today. And it definitely molded and shaped my military career. As that being my first duty station, I was very influential. I was easily influenced when I arrived there. And because they had such high standards, I just adopted that. If this is how it's done, this is how it's done. I didn't know anything else. So when I arrived at Fort Bragg, they asked me, they put me in the 82nd Airborne Division, and they said, hey, you're not airborne qualified. Do you want to be? Well, being the type of man that I am, well, yeah. If everybody else is airborne qualified, I want to be airborne qualified too. I don't want to be that guy that's everybody else is jumping out of airplanes and I'm waiting for them on the ground. I want to get up there too. So they said, okay, fill out the necessary paperwork and sent me down to Fort Benning, Georgia for 3 weeks of airborne training. I had a pretty good idea what to expect there because I was surrounded by hundreds of men and women that had already been through that training. So they all briefed me and told me what to expect, and for the most part, they were spot on. That was some hard training, but it wasn't like unbearable. But it was scary. It was I hate heights. To this day, I still don't like heights. But I've jumped out of helicopters and airplanes, and I've done all of that. I don't have my jump log in front of me, but if I had to estimate, I would say I've exited, upwards of 50 aircraft, as my time as a paratrooper.
What is it to feel like? Somebody's never jumped out of a helicopter or airplane. What is it? How do you feel?
Well, anybody who tells you they're not scared, I don't believe is being truthful.
Okay.
I talked to men and women who were in the 100 jump club, as we called it, who had exited over 100 aircraft, way more than I ever knew that I would ever exit, and they told me that they were scared every single time. And they also told me this is words of wisdom coming from people far more experienced in this than I was, that said that if you're not scared before you exit that aircraft, you become complacent,
make mistakes,
and you're a danger to yourself and the men and women around you. So being scared keeps you vigilant and focused and all of that. So I was scared every single time. Yeah. I was nervous every single time. I had butterflies every single time. But as soon as you exit the aircraft, it is the most amazing experience, feeling that I don't have the words to describe it. It's so quiet up there. When you're in the aircraft, whether it be a Black Hawk helicopter or a C-130 or a C-5 or whatever aircraft you're in, it's loud. It's loud up there, and everyone's yelling back and forth, giving instructions. You're doing this, you're doing that. Everything's very methodical in the airplane. There's commands. The jump master gives the commands, and then you follow the commands, and then the green light goes on, and within a few seconds, 64 paratroopers have exited an aircraft systematically. So it's somewhat chaotic, but organized in the airplane. But the second you exit, it's quiet. It's deafening noise in the aircraft to quiet immediately. And it's just you and your parachute. And you're just looking around. And you're only in the air for, I think they say, well, depending on the wind conditions and what aircraft you're jumping out of and what type of parachute. I jumped with several different kinds of parachutes. But depending on those factors, you're only in the air for less than a minute, usually. Less than, I think the average is 54 seconds.
Okay.
And but that 54 seconds seems like an eternity when you're in the air.
Yeah.
And they do that because it's not safe. You know, you don't want to jump into combat and be floating in the air for an hour.
Forever you get shot.
You want to exit the aircraft and get to the ground
Yeah.
and put your weapon into operation quickly.
Yeah.
So that's why it's designed like that. Men far smarter than I'll ever be designed it that way. But it's an awesome experience. I got paid to do something that some people pay to do.
Yeah, some people pay to go up and they do.
And it was and it's being a paratrooper is one of my prouder accomplishments of being in the military. It's a small corps of men and women who are very proud of that fact.
Yeah.
If you ever get into a small group of paratroopers, you're gonna hear a lot of swear words. Someone's probably gonna be drinking, and pride's gonna be pouring out of all of their pores. It's something they're proud of. They're proud of it all, everything they've ever done, and a lot of good stories will come from paratroopers.
So when you were in Fort Bragg?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so where did you go from Fort Bragg?
Well, while I was at Fort Bragg, while I was there, I was sent to Afghanistan, okay? April 2010, I was deployed to Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. I was part of what they call the surge. I don't know if you ever heard, President Obama had a surge of troops into Afghanistan. I was part of that surge.
Okay.
I was one of the soldiers who was sent over as part of that. I don't remember how many soldiers were surged into Afghanistan, but I was part of that. April 2010, they sent me to Afghanistan. While I was there, as I said, I deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division. I went over there by myself. The unit they were sending me to was a field artillery unit, a HIMARS unit. HIMARS is an acronym for High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. They were already over there. So they, in the most literal sense, within a week's notice, that they notified me like 7 days. You have 7 days to prepare. You're going to Afghanistan on Thursday or what have you.
Okay.
So they gave me a less than a week's time to prepare, and they were sending me to Afghanistan. So they were sending me to a unit that I didn't know anybody. They weren't even expecting me. It was just how I deployed is kind of funny. Because I was in the JAG Corps, I had a lot of face time with the commanders in my unit. Any disciplinary action that occurred in the unit had to go through our office. And all of the disciplinary actions are done through the commanders. Well, the Army, like anything else, is very political. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, it is. And because I was in the JAG Corps, I had a lot of face time with some high-ranking individuals. If it hadn't been for my position and for what I did in the military, I probably never would have been deployed, but I wanted to deploy.
Okay.
So I leveraged myself. I leveraged what little influence I had. I called in favors and pulled strings to get deployed.
Okay.
I upset a lot of people by doing so, but I wanted to deploy. I wanted to serve my country overseas. So based on what I did and the favors that I called in, they deployed me solo. So they put me on an aircraft by myself to go to Afghanistan to meet up with a unit, a HIMARS unit people that I didn't know.
Okay.
So that was stressful in itself. You know, going to a war zone to meet up with men and women that you haven't trained with.
Yeah.
They don't know you. You don't know them. They don't trust you. I mean, they trust you, but they don't know who you are, what kind of soldier you are. That was nervous. That was scary in the beginning. So I arrived in Afghanistan. I flew into Bagram Airfield in Parwan province. Flew in there. I had a liaison who met me on the airfield. grabbed my bags and took me to my unit, which was, like I said, was a field artillery unit. I was embedded with these field artillery guys for, at the time, field artillery only allowed men into the unit at the time. Okay, there were no females. I believe there was a female or two in supply, but as far as the field artillery guys go, we were only men. And so I was with them for 2 or 3 months in Afghanistan, running fire missions, field artillery, shooting missiles and rockets and things like that. I was trained in a HIMARS course while I was there. Now, I was not HIMARS qualified, but I learned a lot about it while I was with these guys for just 3 months. But while I was there, another unit called JSOC, which is the Joint Special Operations Command, which is a higher tiered unit, pulled me from the field artillery unit. Somehow or another, through the grapevine, they got word that there was a JAG guy on the ground in Afghanistan, and they needed someone. These are their words, not mine. This was the explanation that I received. They needed someone with some education that could, speak well, could read, copious amounts of paperwork and things like that. They needed a JAG guy, but not to do JAG work. So I didn't know what I was going. This is a very secretive unit, very prestigious unit, tip of the spear kind of thing. That's what they say, they're tip of the spear. So they pulled me from America's Honor Guard, the 82nd Airborne Division, and pulled me in the JSOC. So again, I was pulled from guys that I had learned to love and placed in another unit that I didn't know anybody.
Okay.
JSOC is unique. It stands for Joint Special Operations Command. Joint meaning it's made up of all the service branches. I was serving with, Marine Recon, Army Green Berets,
Rangers.
Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force combat controllers and PJs. If JSOC is made up of the best of the best of the best, all combined into one unit. So you take the best of the Navy, you take the best of the Army, you take the best of the Air Force, you take the best of, all the Marines. You take the cream of the crop of those guys, and you put them all in one unit. And
Like an all-star team.
it's an all-star team. It really is. I was not an all-star, okay? I want to be clear about that, okay? I was not part of this Special Operations Brotherhood. I had no Special Operations training prior to arriving there. I was just your average paralegal paratrooper, okay? I was just your average guy. But they put me in with these exceptional human beings, okay? These exceptional men and women. These are the men that are really fighting the war on terrorism over there. And they put me in with these guys, and I was immediately humbled because, there's, you've got CIA, FBI, all these, secret squirrel type guys walking around, and I'm working shoulder to shoulder with them.
Like you see in the movies, right?
It's just like you see in the movies. It really is. And what you read in the books, it's just like that. And you can find, and I don't want to talk too much about the unit just because I don't know what all I can and can't talk about. Yeah. When I entered there, I was read on to a lot of secret and top secret caveats, and I signed a non-disclosure agreement that required a lot of the places and things that I did cannot be discussed for 70 years. 70 years from now, I'll probably be in the ground.
Yeah.
So I'll never be able to talk about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
But if you'll allow me, I would
Yeah.
like to read this citation that I received. I received this citation while I was with this unit, JSOC. And this kind of is a whole picture view of what I did, okay? This was an award. This is the highest award that I received while I was in the military. It was the highest medal that I received. It was the a JCOM, a Joint Commendation Award, okay? And this is what it says. When I was deployed, I was a specialist. I was an E4. So, Specialist William J. Williford distinguished himself by exceptionally meritorious achievement from 0 September 2010 to 01 April 2011 while serving as the Operational Coordination Group, Joint Operations Center, Afghanistan, non-commissioned officer for Task Force 310 during combat operations in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. So I arrived in I arrived in April, and I got with these guys in September. Okay? So that's explanation for the time difference. Specialist William J. Williford's professional and keen awareness of cultural sensitivities provided for the most accurate and reliable depiction of sensitive Joint Task Force operations to the distinguished Afghan members of the OCG, as well as permitting a secure atmosphere for tactful discussion and diplomatic debate. His capacity to manage various surveillance and geospatial systems in real time were of paramount importance to the transmission of crucial data to high-ranking officials within the Afghan Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, and National Directorate of Security. That's basically the Afghan Army, the Afghan Police, and the Afghan FBI, CIA. That's what those three organizations are.
Okay.
Many of whom were hand-selected by President Karzai. The men and women that I was working with, a lot of them were friends and acquaintances of President Karzai, and he picked them for this job. With upwards of 10 missions in a single night, Specialist Williford was the pinnacle of composure, filtering all data in a rapid, judicious, and prioritized arrangement. Utilizing his experience and concise language, Specialist Williford ensured ease of information dissemination to our Afghan partners. Specialist William J. Williford was responsible for all logistics within the OCG. He performed with the commitment and competence of a seasoned non-commissioned officer. I was not a commissioned officer at this time, non-commissioned officer at this time, but I was serving I was an E4 serving in an E8 slot.
Okay.
While a member of the OCG, Specialist Williford was responsible for maintaining a fleet of 9 vehicles which required consistent registration, fueling, and maintenance. The numerous computer systems within the Joint Operations Center, Afghanistan, JOC Alpha, also require constant attention and difficult upkeep. Specialist Williford was instrumental in the preservation of these systems in the challenging environment of Afghanistan. During periods of extended demand and exertion, Specialist Williford ensured that all information was conveyed in a timely and comprehensive manner. The extent to which Specialist Williford administered to the needs of the OCG cannot garner enough praise. Specialist William J. Williford demonstrated an adept faculty for management and dependability. Given his numerous talents in this regard, Specialist Williford was afforded to act as the Operation Coordination Group Day Operations Non-Commissioned Officer in Charge. I was actually promoted to a higher position while in JSOC. It was kind of a big deal, and there was a lot of pushback about it, but ultimately cooler heads prevailed. His commitment to excellence and undaunted enthusiasm provided the fuel for the successful prosecution of this role. Specialist Williford immediately took the initiative to update many outmoded systems to ensure the most logical and efficient transfer of data, as well as post-operation reports. As the OCG Day Operations NCOIC, Specialist Williford was responsible for the accountability and maintenance of a multitude of computer and audio-visual systems. Specialist Williford was able to navigate this complex network with ease. Although acting in a position well above his pay grade, Specialist Williford fulfilled all duties with the highest degree of professionalism and competence. Specialist William J. Williford exercised all duties with absolute precision and vigor. His significant contributions to the OCG were critical to the success of the task force mission. The distinctive accomplishments of Specialist William J. Williford reflected great credit upon himself, the United States Army, and the Department of Defense. That citation is something that I'm very proud of.
I'm glad.
That award didn't come from the United States of the Army. That award came from the Department of Defense, which oversees all the branches.
Yeah.
And so that is, to me, that is significant as well. The Army didn't give me that award, the Department of Defense did. Okay. So a much higher ranking individual had to approve that award, and it was approved by a 3-star general. In addition to a lot of those tasks, I traveled outside the wire regularly, outside of the base regularly. Me and men and women were in harm's way regularly. I also, while I was in Afghanistan, received what they call the Combat Action Badge, which is in my eyes the most prestigious award that I received, because it shows that I was actively engaged in combat while in Afghanistan. And I quickly brought that citation that I wanted to read. While I was doing all these things, I traveled a lot. As you can imagine, traveling a lot in Afghanistan in a war zone is dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Traveling is very dangerous. And I was traveling weekly. Weekly I was traveling to airfield, outpost, forward operating base, outpost. I was moving around a lot. I can't really talk about all the locations, but I got to see a lot of the countryside, so to speak. But this is the narrative for my combat action badge, and it's very short, it's very brief, and very to the point. On 16 December 2010, at approximately 0116 Zulu, William J. Williford engaged the enemy with small arms fire from Salerno Forward Operating Base, Afghanistan, and performed satisfactory under pressure. Therefore, we recommend him to be awarded the Combat Action Badge. End of narrative. You can see it's very vague, but it gets its point.
It says enough in its words.
It says enough, doesn't it? It says that on 16 December 2010, I engaged the enemy.
Well, it sounds to me like, if I want to sum both those up, it sounds like you're very well spoken, you're cool on your feet, but when you have to, you can handle yourself.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot. I did the best that I could, Again, I want to emphasize, I was a boy among men in my unit, okay? These guys the men and women that I was embedded with while deployed were quiet professionals. I'm an ordinary guy surrounded by extraordinary men and women. And my goodness, every day was a learning experience with these guys. I mean, these operators. I don't have the words to describe the things that they did on behalf of our nation. And I was there in a supporting role. Okay, I was supporting these men and women. I'm not Rambo, but these guys were. Yeah. And it was humbling. It was a humbling experience. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience being around these men and women. And I learned so much from them. I'm proud to have served alongside them. I fostered relationships with them, and I'm still in contact with many of them today. Now, one more thing I wanted to add was when I left the military, my official MOS, military occupation specialty, was 27 Delta 03 Sierra. Now, what that means, 27 Delta means paralegal specialist. 03 is your rank. So I was a staff sergeant when I left. So I was a staff sergeant, paralegal specialist. Okay. And then I had the identifier Sierra. Okay? So I was a 27 Delta 03 Sierra. Sierra, most paratroopers are papas. Okay? 03 papas. But you get a special identifier of Sierra when you have deployed with a special operations unit. Okay. So there are not very many people get that identifier, and even fewer paralegals. So I was very unique in the regard that I had a Sierra identifier, which meant, and that means you have deployed. The language is something like, this individual has deployed and fought alongside special operation forces in a combat zone. So you can imagine there's not a lot of us with that identifier. If I had stayed in the military, if I had continued my service, I would have always been with a special operations unit from that point forward. That they wouldn't have moved me back to big army, as they say. I would have always been in special forces as long as I wanted to have been.
In big army, that means like the mainstream army.
Yes, sir.
And the guys you're talking about, they kind of they get to choose their own weapons. Is that right?
Not so much that. Special operations conduct unconventional warfare.
Well, I mean, they one of their benefits is they get to kind of choose the stuff they use and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of perks to be in special operations. There's a lot of perks, and it's because they're in harm's way.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time, every single day,
Yeah.
pretty much, and so there's a lot of perks to being in special operations. There's what they call relaxed grooming standards, where they can grow beards.
They fit in more with the culture.
With the culture and the people. They don't necessarily have to be in uniform every day. And these were a lot of perks that I was able to utilize while I was with these guys. And again, I wasn't one of them, but I was with them.
Okay.
And so they wanted me to look and act and be like them.
Okay.
And fit in. And I mean, if I'd walked around wearing just a conventional Army uniform amongst all these guys who weren't, well, I'd have stood like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So they wanted me to integrate with them as well. And after a year's time, nearly a year's time being with these guys, I became one of them in a sense that they accepted me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
They saw how you handled yourself, and it takes a while.
It takes a while. That did not happen overnight. But by the end of it, they respected me and hated to see me go. And I was there for a full year, whereas a lot of these guys only deploy for 3 or 6 months at a time because of how much combat they see. So they loved me because I was a continuity piece. I was there. I saw 3 rotations of operators go through, and I was still there. So I saw men and women come and go. But so when the new guys came in, I was able to brief them on what's been happening and how we're doing business. Yeah. And that was beneficial to the unit as a whole. So that was really neat. We're talking about my job and my rank and things like that. Something else that I'm proud of is I went in as a private first class and I left as a staff sergeant. So I entered like everyone does as a junior enlisted, and I left as a staff sergeant, an E6. I went in as an E3, I left as an E6. I was promoted, and this is just for the record, and for because of my service record, just documenting this. I was promoted as fast as any individual can be promoted in the service. Okay, I was promoted to the day. I was promoted as fast as you can to the day in the Army. Meaning Uncle Sam saw fit to promote me every single chance that he could. Because there's time requirements. You have to be in a rank so long before you could even be looked at for another rank. So to the day, every time that I was eligible for promotion, I was promoted. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that. And that's not me trying to be boisterous or brag or anything like that. That's just what happened. That's part of my story, you know. And my service record reflects this. And I'm also proud of that because there were individuals who were my superior that by the time I left were my subordinates.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's an interesting contrast. That rarely happens. I attribute a lot of that to the job that I was in because, again, I was always with high-ranking individuals and individuals that were influential. And so when it came time for promotion and they saw my name on a list, oh, I know this guy.
You can handle it.
And that's a lot of it. It's not all me by any means, but I feel like I had something to do with me being promoted.
Yeah.
I hope that I did.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, to be frank, was because of the position that I was in.
I appreciate you sharing that, and but in closing things up, the people that are watching this interview, what would you have them take from this interview? If you can say anything to anybody, what would you have them? If the floor is yours, what would you have them to say about this?
I would just want them to know that, my time in uniform were some of the proudest years of my life. I have no regrets about serving at all. 0, none. It's a worthwhile cause. It's a worthwhile career. Our men and women in uniform are the bravest and brightest that America has to offer, as far as I'm concerned. They'll put their life on the line for the men and women to their left and right. They are just the best. I mean, and I don't know many men and women who regret their service. So it's a worthwhile cause. You know, I fought for my country so that my children don't have to. You know, and I did not serve 20 years. I mean, I came in September 16th, and on active duty, I left active duty on 5 October 2014 from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, with 5th Special Forces Group, and I left the reserve on July 2016. But the reason I say that is because every second of it was worth it. I didn't serve 20 years, but I'm proud of my service. You know, and it worries me because I don't know what I can do. I have a lot of years left, I hope, on this planet, and I don't know what I'm going to be able to do to top those years. You know, the time that I was in service, I don't know what I can do for my nation or my country that can top that. And that's a lot to live up to, you know. I don't know what I can do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best, but hope I didn't peak too early.
Well, I think you did a lot.
I don't feel like I've done a lot, but I did what was asked of me. I always did what was asked of me, and with no pushback. I never questioned. Maybe in my head I questioned certain things, but I always did it.
Does it when you see the flag when you come in here, you have a certain feeling about it, then you think that other people that maybe don't appreciate it or not as much as, do you think that?
Absolutely, yes. I fly a flag outside of my home every single day. I have a flag flying on my home right now as we speak. I'll tell you something that's personal to me. I used to, as a child, I would watch my grandfather. Again, he was in heavy combat, you know, in Korea, etc. He was an infantryman, so he really went through the meat grinder. I would see him get emotional and tear up watching military ceremonies on TV. I'd see tears in his eyes at military ceremonies on television. I never understood it.
Yeah.
I knew it was okay.
Yeah.
I knew he wasn't crying because he was sad. But I didn't know why he was crying. Okay, but I knew it wasn't a bad thing. I saw him tear up during the singing of the Star Spangled Banner and watching kids at the Pledge of Allegiance. I've seen him tear up during all of that. I've seen him tear up with televised military funerals and things like that. Again, I never understood it, but I knew that it was okay. I catch myself doing the same thing today. It's hard and emotional for me to watch these ceremonies on television. It's pride now. I mean, I'm out of the service. I'm no longer a soldier. So when I see these things, I reflect back to the places that I've been, the people that I've seen, the countries that I've visited. All this stuff, it just comes flooding back to you.
Yeah.
You know, you can go.
Brings back memories.
It brings back memories, and now I understand why he would get emotional.
It wasn't a sadness; it was a pride.
It was a pride, and he was proud of what he had done, and it's difficult. You know, I mean, I've got a small lump in my throat now talking about it.
I understand.
You know, and again, it's pride, and I mean, no one can take that away from me. I can lose everything tomorrow. You know, God can take everything that I have, all the material items that I have in my life, and take it all, and I can be living on the streets. But no one can ever take away the sense of pride that I have for what I did and what my brothers and sisters and I accomplished over there. You know, we only did what was asked of us, but we made a difference. I don't sleep at night thinking, did I make a difference over there? Because I know I made a difference in at least someone's life.
Yeah.
Over there. At least one person. I know. I don't question that. And so I think I hope I did my country proud as far as that goes.
It sounds like you really did.
So to answer your question, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked there.
I understand.
To answer your question, yes. When I look at the flag, I'm overwhelmed with a sense of pride and stuff. And I wish everybody could feel that.
Yeah.
But only less than 1% of our nation can.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story. and you sharing, you're keeping your story alive, and I appreciate your service, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.